Over. Ah, there we go. Okay, we're good. So I was just saying, it's another Sunday. I was actually panicking for a second there because I thought, oh my god, this dodgy mic that I bought for very cheap in China has broken on me. I could not have expected that to happen, but it has not happened. So as a matter of fact, we have to give China some credit here. thus far, I think it's been like 3 streams I've used it for now. It has turned out for me pretty well. So it's been a fairly quiet week. It's not really much to talk about. I mean, well, quiet. I guess technically the Iran war has started again, but that was going to happen anyways, right? A great hero of the Senate, Lindsey Graham, has tragically passed away this morning. I opened up X right as soon as I woke up, and then I looked at the feed, and I saw Lindsey Graham had died, and it just ruined my whole morning. I was very upset about it. As a bachelor for his entire life, he's never married, never had kids. He's clearly one of us, right? He's clearly a true cell. So it's always tragic to see one of our comrades fall the way that he did. In his valiant attempt to maintain Israel's foreign policy in America. It's very tragic. And other than that, though, I mean, actually, I was kind of at a loss on what to talk about this morning, and then I saw Lindsey Graham. And then we also have, what's the other guy's name? Let me see here. Oh, this is something else I want to talk about. We have a few toll-paids that have happened this week. Oh yeah, what was his name? Mitch McConnell also is probably dying. I was going to talk a little bit before I got into this foid about how I've been warning about how things are going to change very rapidly when the boomers die off. And we're starting to hit the first wave. Now, I think Mitch McConnell isn't quite a boomer. I'm pretty sure that he's silent gen. But you're going to start seeing waves of these people dying in office because they refuse to retire. And you're going to see, as the generation shifts from baby boomers to some Gen X, but it's going to be disproportionately millennial because the Gen X generation is fairly small demographically. So you're actually going to see a transition from boomers to a combination of Gen X and older millennials. And that's where you're going to see the big shifts in terms of politics, like how the politics will change in the country. And it seems kind of, because we've lived under boomer-controlled governments for our entire lives, like 40, 45 years of boomer control. I think from like the 80s, there was still like the Ronald Reagan types that were previous generation, but boomers were the dominant voting bloc, and they were just entering into government. From the 90s onwards, it's been basically baby boomer dominated. So it's been almost 40 years, and we are transitioning out of that now. And it's going to be exciting. As I was saying in my previous stream, I think this is going to be the onset of mass looting of the government, where like people are going to vote in parties that will just directly campaign on taking resources from various sectors, various groups. Eventually, they're going to run out of whites, because I know right now they're using white men as the enemy for their coalition to hold it together. That's only going to last for so long, because whites have largely become, like white men have largely become an underclass in the younger generations, with the exception of the generationally wealthy. And we're actually seeing this disenfranchisement creeping up the competency ladder. We're including like STEM educated people, right? Because the funny thing is, when you have an oversupply of workers across the socioeconomic ladder, across the education ladder, the competency ladder, you can afford to be picky, and you can start being picky on things like DEI policies, and you'll still get people that are adequately competent, right? Like, there's, I think there's like, over 1 billion Africans now? Well, there's a lot of very intelligent Africans that I've met that are just as capable as, at a minimum, just as capable as like a typical graduate from a STEM position or STEM a STEM degree in America that could do those jobs competently, but they fulfill the DEI category as well. And so they are going to be favored over the domestic population of whites. And it's not just Africans, of course. That's just an example. So as time goes on, you're going to run out of whites to use as the boogeyman, just because they're going to, in a demographic sense, they're going to cease to exist. And then also in an economic sense, there's just not going to be anything left to take from them. So at that point, then the question is, like, do they just go back to going after the rich? Because they would have to start going after the diverse rich. That's going to be the next political question. So I would say Mamdani is going to be a good signal for the direction that they're going to take. Because he's pretty astute. Like, he's a pretty intelligent guy in terms of his, like, he's better than J.D. Vance when it comes to campaigning, when it comes to being personable, likable. I mean, he's fake. He's completely fake. But he is very good at being a politician. And one thing that struck me was, because I was asked yesterday on a VC, why is it that Bernie Sanders is supporting these Muslims like Mamdani, who are, like the Muslims are anti-Jewish, so why is he supporting them if they're hostile to Jews in Israel as a group? And I was just explaining, Mamdani is not a Muslim by any stretch. Like, most of these people, like, for example, this guy in the picture here, he's a Jordanian that this Floyd shacked up with and then got murdered by. I guarantee you he's not a Muslim in terms of his sincere religious. Like, I doubt he's attending the mosque every Friday prayers. I doubt that he's like a genuine pious religious Muslim. Like, most of these people, and you see the same thing in Europe with the Muslim immigrants that have come in. Like, they'll use Islam as a rallying point to differentiate themselves from Europeans, but they themselves are not sincerely religious. Like, most of them are basically degenerates. Like, they're drug addicts, they're criminals, they're thugs. Like, there's nothing sincerely religious about them at all. And Mamdani is the same way. Like, that entire class of people is just upwardly mobile. They want access to the elite positions that the previous ruling class has right now, and they're unwilling to defend their positions, or they're politically incapable of defending them. So I think it's because they're going to want to maintain the white man as the enemy for as long as they can, purely because it's just an easy way to pull in all of these conflicting groups together. But I do wonder if white men get, like, driven into the underclass as a group, maybe there will be an orientation change in the politics in order to continue going after the wealthy, and maybe even incorporating some of these guys. Like, once they become, like, they're not a credible enemy anymore. But that's speculation. And let me just read a few of the comments here. I'm at the wage cage too, so good to pass the time. Yeah, that's one thing that kind of sucks, is that it was kind of nice being a NEET for a while, because I could sit and read news stories and get pissed off at things, and it would consume most of my time. But and I would have stuff to talk about, because I would have all these news stories lined up that would piss me off here and there. Nowadays, for the most part, if I'm not at work, I'm practicing Portuguese, so I just haven't had much time to go through the news. And as well, to be honest with you, a big problem that I've had is that I find it very depressing when I see what's happening around me in the area that I'm in, and also in the country. And then I read these news stories that are designed, I remember talking about this in one of my streams, the way that these algorithms are designed, they're designed to pull your attention to things that aggravate you because you'll interact with them, and then that makes you further angry and pissed off. And I really don't like the effect that this has on me psychologically. But, I can't help myself sometimes, but I try to avoid it because it just makes me feel bad. Like, I read this story, like, this chick, what is her name? Carney? I'm sure she's related to Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, but she was, like, doing these videos about how, and she was, like, really vulgar about it. Because you know how a lot of these foids, they'll try and mask their intentions, or they'll mask their point of view to in like universalistic or moralistic language. Like this chick was straight up saying, "Oh, migrant dick is better than what was it? Like better than a racist dick or something like that." Like she was actually saying shit like this. And you know, it's not even a matter, and this is something that I think a lot of guys get caught up on. It's not even a matter of whether she's like she genuinely is getting D'd down better by this guy versus a different guy. I actually don't think that's even important. The point is that she wants to emasculate and attack her men. Like you would see the same thing being talked about with black women towards black men. You'd see the same thing being talked about with Asian women towards Asian men. Like whatever their target group of men is that they want to emasculate and belittle, that's what they're going to do, and this is the tactic that they use. So when I saw this chick getting beaten to death, that's not a laugh. That's a sob. It's very sad. It was very tragic. But I have to say, one of the things that's kind of funny about this is you're seeing a lot of people now, or well, I would say a lot of men, who are not going for the, tragic, but she was brainwashed. Maybe if she wasn't brainwashed, she would be alive now. If she was a racist, she'd be alive, and this is a terrible tragedy. Like, you don't actually see people saying this now. They're saying, or men, I should say, saying this. They're saying, yeah, fuck yeah, it's good that she died. Like, obviously, YouTube, I'm not saying that myself. I'm saying this is what these guys are saying. Is that they're saying, like, fuck this bitch, she was our enemy, and it's a good thing that our enemies are dead. Like, that's the impression that you're getting now from I guess you could call them the racist right wing or the white nationalist right wing. And while I've talked about how the race stuff is rather self-defeating, like it's not really going to go anywhere, what to me is more interesting and more important is that there is a turning on this where there's the section of these guys that are frustrated with women. Like their primary motivation for embracing white nationalism is frustration with women. You're starting to see them getting peeled off from this mainstream body who are very much worshiping women, like white women specifically, and they're trying to orient their ideology around white women. And trying to, this is what I talked about in my first video that I made coming back, was you're going to see something resembling, I guess you could call it Chad nationalism or simp nationalism, where the whole point is going to be trying to sell like white demographic preservation as beneficial to women. And you're really starting to see these two groups split. And the question will then be, is this actually going to succeed? And I would say it probably is not. Because, like, as I pointed to in the video that I made, I talked about France and how it is the case that French women are voting alongside French men for far-right parties now. Like, it's pretty much, if you eliminate the boomers, and you look at young people, you do see that women vote pretty much the same rate as men for the far-right party. And, like, there's not a big difference based on sex for voting. But the problem is, France it's pretty much too late demographically for France. There's really no way to, because if you look at their demographic situation, it's not just the birth rate, it's also the rate of mixing that has made it so that you can't draw a distinction between these groups in any meaningful way. It's like, thus far, I have to say, like, I've interacted with a bunch of French online, men and women, just casually interacting with them in online spaces. Thus far, I've only met one guy who was 100% French. Every other one of them was mixed with North African or mixed with black, or mixed of like half North African, half black. That, like, some combination thereof. And of course, it's always, or almost always, on the mother's side that they're going to be French. It's not the father's side. And at that point, then you then have to wonder, could it even maybe be that and I haven't investigated this. I haven't dug too deeply into the French stuff because you have to know the language to really interact properly with them. But I do have to wonder if, I'd be interested in seeing the demographic breakdown of the far-right voters, because I suspect a significant chunk of them are actually ethnic/mixed women that grew up without having a French male influence in their life. And having grown up in that environment, maybe this would alter their perception. And I would suspect that if you were to look at 100% ethnically French women, it would be interesting to see what their voting breakdown is versus the mixed ones. Because oftentimes, it's kind of like what you see with, in the United States, if you meet a mixed, like, black girl, like mulatto, half black, half white, like, most of the time, obviously, she's going to have a white mother, black father. But I have encountered some of them, and it's interesting because there was this one girl I remember talking to, and this was a while ago, so this was like 7 or 8 years ago. But she was half black, obviously on her father's side, of course, but she really hated black men. And she actually had a lot of problems with her own mother for putting her in that situation, both in terms of her racial composition and also in terms of her family environment, because of course the father left, right? It's fairly common. And she was one of these, and because she was already mixed, she didn't have that aversion to being racist the way that a 100% white person would. And also, there's no exoticism with the other race. If you're mixed with them, there's no exoticism there. Like, they're not this grass is greener foreigner. You know, one thing that I've noticed with white women actually is they. And this is a rather tragic thing for white nationalists that find based white women, because most of the time these women acquire their basedness because they actually got into relationships with men of various racial backgrounds under the assumption, and this is what I've found all white women seem to assume until they actually experience it firsthand, is that all these men of different backgrounds, different races, different cultures, basically the way that white men interact with and treat women is just the norm. That's just how men in general are. And that there's really no difference between these groups of people. Like whether they're from the Middle East or Africa or Asia, whatever, South Asia, etc. There's no difference in their treatment towards women on a personal level. And when you find based white women, oftentimes it's because they went into a relationship with one of these guys with the expectation that the guy was just basically a exotic looking white guy. Like there's this term that, if you guys know Ramsey Paul, the YouTuber, he's been doing YouTube videos since like 2006 or 2007. I remember he said this thing once where he's like, these white liberals, it's like they think if you were to take a nickel and you were to scratch the skin of this brown or black person, that there would be a white person underneath if you just scratch the ticket a little bit. And that's sort of the way I think a lot of these women think, is that there's not really a serious difference. And then when they actually experience it firsthand, like I've heard stories secondhand of girls that, like I heard of this one girl who got involved with I think it was like a Nigerian or something, like second-gen Nigerian guy, when she was in college. And this guy was like a striver. He was on the track team. He was also on one of these more nerdier clubs. I forget exactly what. It was like a computer science club or something. So he seemed like a safe bet, but apparently it ended with him like being really physically violent, attacking her, and then getting arrested. And this is what made her become based. And well, what are you going to say? There's a lot of guys actually who I think would be fine with that, because it actually does result in it does result in them becoming based in a sincere sense, because it's on a personal level. It's a personal experience. But there's a lot of guys that have a problem with that, right? It's just something that you have to know. And by the way, this is something I've explained to incels as well. Is that, like, or white incels that want a trad GF, and they're like, well, I want a virgin. Like, if you want a woman who, first of all, you have to think of a woman who's willing to accept you, right? That's already a limited supply. And then you have to think about how many women out there are virgins at, depending on how old you are, right? Like, you'd have to be in your, usually we're talking to guys in their early 20s at the youngest, up to and including their 30s. You're going to have to accept that that's basically impossible. You have to give up on that. But then there's some of these guys who will be like, well, if I can't get that, then I'm not going to take anything. Like, I knew this one guy who got contacted by a girl, and he was in he wasn't directly identified as an incel, but he was in one of these Bapsphere, like, he's one of these posters in the Bapsphere, and he was contacted by this woman who had like a couple of ex-boyfriends or whatever, but she was the same age as him. He was in his late 20s. And he was talking about how, I want a fairy tale romance. Like, he was actually doing the Foyd thing, where he was like, I want a fairy tale romance. She's not the girl of my dreams or whatever. I was trying to, like, shake his head and tell him, listen, dude, you realize that it gets exponentially harder every year after 25. Exponentially harder for you as a man. And if you don't take what's being offered right now, it'll probably never come back, and you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. And you never listened to me, so I don't know what happened. But anyways, let me catch up on the comments here. Eat slop, feel like slop, beyond over for froglets. I've been eating, I found this jeet slop unironically straight from India. These, like, bags of dal and masala stuff. It's like this ghee or something that's mixed in with and you can buy these packets that are like the size of a large bowl for $1. And probably I'm going to end up with arsenic poisoning and die. But thus far, it's been, for the cost that I paid, it's been pretty good. I can't complain, to be honest. And, this is, I feel like I have to integrate into Canadian culture. This is one of the ways I can do it. So let me see here. They don't discriminate race. It gets too hard to get statistics from France. French men can't even do paternal tests. It's very cucked society. Jacked up, I actually had a conversation with a French guy about this. He was ethnically French. He wasn't living in France, but he was explaining to me that their culture is so cucked that you can't even, if you were to try and remove this as a, make it so that paternity tests can be used, there would be opposition from French men. Why do you think there would be opposition from French men? The reason why is because they don't want to, the culture there, cheating and promiscuity is so common that they don't want to end up getting saddled with a kid who they fathered with someone else's wife, and then it gets discovered through a paternity test. There would actually be opposition from French men for this. Which, I've been reading this book about Brazil that was recommended to me by a Brazilian. It was called La Grande Casa, or La Casa Grande, that's it, La Casa Grande. And it's basically talking about the colonial history of Brazil. And one of the things they said was, when the Portuguese settlers first arrived, there were these naked Amerindian women literally throwing themselves at the sailors when they landed. And it was completely baffling. And actually, if you read about the colonial history of Brazil, it's like they lost control of the country. Like the church, the Catholic Church, lost control of the culture It became completely degenerate for a significant period of time. But it kind of makes me think about, it's kind of similar how Europe is in some cases, in some ways now, where you have these they're not savages like the Europeans, but you have this situation where the women are extremely liberated and they're just doing whatever they please, and the men that are coming from these extremely conservative cultures, they're kind of baffled at what this means. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys ever remember the first time that you discovered pornography or anything like that. I remember the first time I discovered pornography. It was like really hyper stimulating, and I almost felt like I couldn't control myself at the time because it was so stimulating. And I can kind of see the same thing happen with these guys from these countries that are arriving in Europe with these women that are just completely debauched, and they just end up doing what they do. How would you know this? You haven't been on a date in a decade and are a virgin for all we know. No, actually, I'm a Chad. Actually, I lied about getting a job. I've just been. I found a Stacy that is going to beta box me, and I just have to provide dutiful maintenance sex every single day. I get weekends off. That's it. But no, I'm in a bunch of different circles where I interact with these people. And again, this is why I said that this is secondhand information. I'm not saying that it's absolutely certain. One of the reasons why I put so much effort into infiltrating circles where women are interacting with other women without knowing that there's men there observing them is because you can then get an internal sense of how they discuss this stuff with each other without them thinking that there's any man inside seeing it. And that can be much more reliable because women are very liable to alter their behavior, how they talk about things, what they say, when they think that there's any man that could potentially see them from the inside. Right? So the stuff that I talk about where women talk about these things, this is what they've talked about with each other without the knowledge of any men around observing them. Right? But it could be bullshit. Who knows? Could be bullshit. Virgin women want Chad just like every other woman does. They have high standards. Well, you're absolutely correct. And actually, it's funny because there's this Reddit called Muslim Girls with Taste. And it's sort of like a quasi-feminist Muslim female subreddit. And they'll talk about how they have crazy high standards for men, which of course they should, right? Because think about how a traditional culture works. Okay, if you're a woman, you basically have one shot to marry, maybe two, if you're particularly attractive. Maybe if it doesn't work out the first time, you could divorce. Like I'm talking about in a Muslim context, you could divorce and you could remarry. Maybe while you're still young, if you're above average in attractiveness. But for the most part, it's a very, the opportunity cost is huge for marrying a man. So when you have a huge opportunity cost like that, due to the culture being very rigid about a woman's decisions, naturally she is going to be as uncompromising as possible when it comes to selecting a mate. And so when you look at this Muslim Girls with Taste thing, you'll see, or Muslim matrimonials, you'll see these women are not only demanding all these social expectations for the man, which are typically very liberal social expectations, like he needs to help me with childcare, he needs to help me with the housework, I am well educated, I have a good job, so I'm expecting him to treat me with respect, I'm not going to quit my job after I get married. They'll put all of these requirements on, they're very much liberal in that sense. But then they'll also demand a very high income from the man. Because, once again, if you only have one shot to make, you're going to try and make the best shot you possibly can. Whereas if you look at cultures that are not like that, they're more liberal, they're less rigid on these things, ironically, it is true that women will have lower standards. That doesn't mean that you would be better off. If you're like a sub 5, you're going to suck in both situations. You might be slightly better off in a very conservative culture if you have resources, if you have wealth and money. But for the vast majority of men, you're still probably going to, like, it's a toss-up. At a minimum, a woman's standards, if she knows that she can get back into relationships if one of them fails, she's much more willing to take a chance on something that may not be optimal. That is something that I have noticed. And I think that's part of why, if you look at immigrants, like second-gen immigrants in Western countries, they often have fertility rates that are lower, not only than the first generation of immigrants, but even lower than the white population in the countries that they're in. And that's because oftentimes these people, they're coming from well-to-do, well-educated backgrounds. They have very conservative sexual mores, and so their standards are way higher. The women's standards are way higher. And it's much harder for them they're much less willing to get married to somebody unless they're really optimal. Actually, it's funny because this also, another thing that you see is that there's a really strong dysgenic fertility trend in many parts of the world now, particularly the Muslim world and Asia. And that's because of this traditionalism. Women that get educations, and if you're in Turkey and you're, say, a woman with a master's degree in something, whatever, you cannot be a single mother, because that's against the cultural mores. Like, you'll be ostracized culturally because it's fairly conservative in Turkey still. If you marry a local man, you're very unlikely to find someone who is going to tolerate you prioritizing your career over his. And they're going to have more traditional expectations for your role as a woman. And so what you see in a country like Turkey is that there's a huge negative association between education and fertility. Educated women have extremely low fertility in Turkey, lower than Europe. Whereas if you look in Sweden, there's almost no correlation at this point now. And that's because it's very easy as a woman in Sweden just to have a kid. Out of wedlock, or raise it solo, or if you get with a man and it doesn't work out, you can dump him. So ironically, this actually benefits some of these places, just in purely, it creates huge social problems, but in terms of the genotype, it preserves, these high IQ women don't commit genetic suicide, basically. And you are a serial deflowerer. Sure. I don't know what will get me more up, dudes, is if I'm a serial deflowerer or if I'm a perma-virgin, because I could be either. I'm kind of like Schrodinger's incel here. New girl gave me severe trauma, and now I'm so sick I don't even know what to bother. Yeah, I mean, again, this is one of the things that bothers me about X, is that you just get these e-girls that pop up, and then as soon as they pop up and they start making noise, something's going to come out, or they're going to do something fucked up. And it's just really depressing. It's one of the reasons why I haven't even really paid close attention to the right-wing sphere now. I see Nick Fuentes is now starting to become more, he's talking more pro-Republican now, because I think he realizes what's going to happen to him if the left wins, but I think at this point it's a little too late. Too little too late at this point. But I haven't even really cared. What's the point? Actually, I have to say, when I was starting up the stream, I was kind of struggling to find something passionate to talk about, because the only things that are happening now are things that are kind of irrelevant if you don't have an investment in the system. Yeah, okay, immigration is making things worse, I suppose, but I wouldn't get in economically anyways because I'm the wrong race and I'm the wrong sex. I already have roadblocks put in place in that regard. And there's already enough people here that they can saturate whatever lucrative jobs there are. So more Indians doing DoorDash, you could say they're kind of a nuisance, but other than that, it's I can't even really bring myself to care. I have a Canadian who is really into politics, and he sends me he'll send me stuff about Canada, like what's happening in this election or that election, and I just can't bring myself to care. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, it's terrible that election was lost. Oh no, what a tragedy. And it's interesting because as I was saying, I was reading this book about Brazil, and there is one thing I saw that kind of stuck with me, and it reminded me of something I read in when I was a teenager. I read Descent of Man by Charles Darwin, and this is where he was talking about natural selection as it applies to humans, but he also went into the collapse of the native populations in areas that were colonized by the Europeans. And it was sort of this weird phenomenon where it's almost like the men give up. The men just sort of give up and become nihilistic and refuse to go on. And Charles Darwin was of the opinion that this is basically like a biological reaction to being outcompeted in some way or another. And it's not even that they're like acting as men. They're just sort of, it's like it's like a materialistic thing for Darwin. But then I read this passage in this book that I'm reading. Here, I'll pull it up here. I'll read it. In the case of cultures with interests and tendencies that were so antagonistic, it is natural that the contact between them should result to the disadvantage of each. Only a special combination of circumstances in the case of Brazil prevented the Europeans and natives from becoming deadly enemies before they had come together as man and wife, as master and disciple, a form of contact that was to lead to a cultural degradation through processes that were more subtle, marked by a slower rhythm than in other parts of the continent. Goldenweiser calls attention to the fate of the Mongols subjected to Russian rule, and the same goes for the Amerindians, the natives of Australia, Melanesia, Polynesia, Africa. Always the same drama, the backward cultures disintegrating beneath the yoke or pressure of the more advanced ones. What kills off primitive people is the loss, as it were, of their will to live, or the loss of an interest in their own values, as Goldenweiser puts it. Once their environment has been altered and the equilibrium of their lives has been broken by civilized man. Of the primitives of Melanesia, W.H.R. Rivers had previously written that they were dying from a lack of interest, dying of banzo, of melancholy, or sometimes they even kill themselves, like those Indians whom Gabriel Suarez observed going about with emaciated and swollen bodies. The devil had appeared to them and set them to eating the earth until they died. And what's interesting about this book is that he contrasts the native population in Brazil, like the men to the women. Hang on one second. I'm getting a ping from Mercer. You are likable, but you have a massive credibility issues considering you are a full-blown wizard. It's hard to take your opinion seriously when you've never... Well, dude, why are you watching my videos? Why are you watching my streams? Like, you could just not watch me. Anyways, let me actually catch up on some of the other comments. Amerindian and Asian foids disrespect their men nonstop. Kind of. I would have to say that there's a difference between how they act in Western countries and white countries versus how they act in their own countries. Amerindians, yes. And I'm actually going to get into that. Asians, yes, Asian women are pretty bad in Western countries as immigrants. But you have to remember is that they have their entire countries to themselves. You know, this was a point I was making when you constantly hear this thing being brought up about how white women are the most loyal race. And what they'll do is they'll compare marriage rates or match rates of white women to other races of women in America. And they'll say, look at 89% of white women are married to white men. And I'm like, yes, but the reason for that is not because they are in some way discriminating against these other groups of men consciously. It's because they're the majority population. Like, not only is America still like 60% white, but the white population in most of America is not distributed evenly throughout the country. Like, there are states where they're almost entirely white, and then there are states where they're almost like they're a minority of the population. Okay, so you have lopsided distributions, and also you have a majority population that is still white, right? Even then, if you look at the admixture rate between whites and Hispanics in California, it's like 25% of whites are having babies with Hispanics, but only 18% of Hispanics are having babies with whites. The reason why is because Hispanics are a larger population in California than whites. It's purely statistical, as I was saying. And the point I made was, it would be like saying that Japanese women are the most loyal race of women in the world, because if you look at Japan, 99% of Japanese women are married to Japanese men. And therefore, they must be extremely loyal. And then if you look at the other minority groups in Japan, like the Koreans or white people, they have almost 100% rate of being married to Japanese. They're completely disloyal. Like, no, it's just a misunderstanding of how this works. And unfortunately, we're not going to be rid of this until the boomers die off. As I said, I think I mentioned this in my previous stream. The age of first birth for white women is like 31 now. And so when we're looking at births that are happening right now, like right this year, we're looking at births to the youngest cohort of millennial women. We aren't even looking at Zoomer women for the most part yet. We're going to have to wait 5 or 6 years until Zoomer women enter that age range to start having babies. Then we will see the generational impact. And I have to say, this is something that I've noticed just now that I'm out in public more now. Millennial women overwhelmingly have babies with white men. Like, there's not very much race mixing at all with millennials, including younger millennials. Zoomers is a different story. They're much less. Now, maybe they won't have children with these guys, but of the women that are younger, like in their mid-20s, let's say, that are having babies, it's not an insignificant percentage where they're having kids with guys that are clearly not white, because the kids are not white. I think that we're going to see that reflected in the demographics in maybe 5 or 6 years, and it's going to be interesting to see them try and explain it. I'm pretty sure they did another post about how whites are 51% of births or something, and then when you actually look at the data, it's births to white mothers are 51% of total births. But then when you subtract the non-white fathers, it goes down to 43%. It's like, yeah, that's actually significant. That's actually important. Even I, with my shit genes, took a foray into PUA and have a social baseline to speak off of. Well, I hate food. Do you have... Like, have I actually talked to you personally? Like, do you have any knowledge of my personal life? Well, I hate food. I'm going to be talking about social opinions and political opinions. So, if you don't like what I have to say on political stuff, then you should just log off. Actually, I think I will just... There we go. Anyways, it's probably Tails' butt hurt. Maybe, I don't know. What age do you have to be considered a wizard? I think it's 30 plus. Brazilians in Japan as well. Well, I have no idea about Brazilians in Japan. I know that I've seen some videos about Brazilians in Japan that they're discriminated against or something in Brazil, or it's not Brazil, excuse me, in Japan, like they claim to be discriminated against. It's because the Japanese don't consider anyone who is they don't consider anyone who is not born in Japan of Japanese parents and speaks Japanese as their first language to be Japanese. So as a consequence, you're going to be treated as a foreigner. Even if you're ethnically 100% Japanese. If you were not born in Japan and you're culturally obviously not Japanese, they're going to treat you differently. It's very different. Anyways, another thing that I wanted to talk about was I found, because one of the things I like to do is I like to peruse some of these what do you call them, message boards. They're kind of like 4chan. And I was perusing this female message board. It's like oriented towards feminists and man-haters. And so you can get some interesting opinions on it. And I got linked to an article that I wanted to go through because it was actually, like, the woman who wrote this was remarkably intelligent. Now, and I'm going to dissect every single thing that she's completely wrong about and how her entire worldview is based on false premises. But she is remarkably intelligent. Like, she does actually have a coherent worldview, and she makes interesting points, which is why I wanted to take the time to go through and dissect it. And this is actually a Black Floyd, and she's talking about white women that message her about what white women can do to further feminism, right? And I was asked about, one guy wanted me to do a video on blacks in America and how the situation is different there. And actually, one of the areas where it is very interesting is in the female sphere. Because black women, they if you go into any female-dominated online sphere, especially if there's any kind of man-hating involved in it, black women are overwhelmingly overrepresented in it. And they're very loud about it too. Like, they'll make everything about themselves, and it's a huge problem for these women. It's not a problem that we have on our end, right? Like, for the most part, I would say we're overrepresented with ethnics like curry cells, rice cells. We're underrepresented with Hispanics. We do have black cells, but I would say that black cells are probably on the same proportion as whites. And then the whites that we do have are like second-gen immigrants for the most part. Like you see a lot of Slavs, like second-gen Slavs that are in our spheres, for reasons that I've discussed. But for women, it's black women are really big and in these circles, and they're very noisy and loud about it. Because another factor that you have to consider is like, we are not woke. Like, we try and exist in reality as it is. We don't, like, we'll talk about race differences, and I try to be fair and hear any contradicting point of view if it's in good faith. Like, for example, if somebody has the opinion that this particular ethnic group or race has it the worst, and then they want to explain why, I'm going to hear it out, and I'm going to consider it. I'm going to consider the points being made. But there's no actual ideological hard lines with us. Like, we're very flexible on these things, and we try and be very pragmatic. We're very willing to disagree on things. When it comes to female spheres, black women are very big. Yeah. That's why they're on femcel forums, because they're like, I think the average black woman's 180 pounds or something. That's why. But in these femcel / feminist radfem circles, they are very woke. Like, they're ideologically woke. So they accept the intersectionalism, they accept critical race theory to various degrees, even if they're not really that cognizant about the details. Like, they just accept the assumptions of it. And so when black women come in and they start making all the noise about how bad things are for black women and making everything about black women's problems, they're not really, like, white women cannot intercede and object to this. Because, like, disagreeing with a black woman as a white woman in these circles is almost considered an offense. You're not allowed to do that. So it creates sort of a weird dynamic. But this particular black woman is an exception in the sense that she does actually try to provide an intelligent argument. As a younger millennial, I have noticed that older millennials and Gen X are more likely to mix. That's interesting, because I've noticed that I've noticed the opposite, at least for me. Like, I've noticed an increase in mixing as you go down the age from millennials to Zoomers. But what you could be seeing is you could be seeing, because one of the things that inflates the male proportion of race mixing in Western countries is baby boomer men importing women from Southeast Asia and these other countries as basically mail order brides as their second wives. So they're like double dipping. They were married to a white woman and then got divorced, and then they imported a woman from like Southeast Asia or whatever who's 20 years younger than them. And that actually is more common than people think. Like it's a bigger phenomenon that people realize, and it does impact the numbers substantially. If you were to remove them, I'm pretty sure the numbers would show white women mixing more than white men on the aggregate. It would be very interesting if we could get like age-limited race mixing percentages where you could see like 35 and under. And that would give us a much clearer vision of what's going on. Because some of these guys that you're describing, they could have been double dipping. Or, yeah, like they could have divorced. If they're in their 40s, they could have divorced and then they remarried like a 30-something-year-old from Southeast Asia. Do you agree that women are taking advantage of the disproportionate racial demographics at hand by having ethnics serve them because they're not in the same league as the guys white women are attracted to? I don't know if I would say that's the case universally, but I have seen examples of that. I remember when I was, during COVID, it was the end of COVID, nobody was wearing masks anymore, and I remember seeing this one couple in Walmart that were wearing masks. They were the only ones in the entire store. It was a white woman, and then this Indian guy who's about the same height as her, sort of slinking around behind her. And they were both wearing masks. And obviously, you could tell who wanted to wear the mask. So I think for a lot of white women, getting one of these ethnic guys, I don't think it would work with black guys. But for Indians, definitely. If they want to get a guy that they know they will have total control over, that would be an example of what they could do. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that as a significant phenomenon as well. And to be fair, let's be fair. I also see white men do this. Like, it's not, there's a reason why there's a meme of like, never ask a white supremacist what race his girlfriend is. Like, there's a reason why that meme exists, right? Because if somebody is like in some way racially conscious or whatever, it's highly likely that they also understand their racial standing in terms of how attractive they are, how attractive their race is to other races of women. And then they would know how to leverage that to get a better relationship from their perspective than what they could get with white women. I know that when I was like right up until COVID, I would say, like right up until I found Blackpill stuff, I had no idea how the racial dynamics worked with men versus women. Because for most of my life, I lived in Ottawa, and Ottawa was an overwhelmingly white city. Like, it was 80% white as a city. It was 80% white well into the 2000s. And it was like 70% white up into COVID. And when I was growing up, most of my interactions were with whites. I rarely saw other races. I mean, I did see them in certain areas, like in some schools. You would find that there would be very diverse population, but it was like segregated. It was not explicitly segregated, but it just so happened that they would coalesce in certain areas, and then there would be areas where there was almost none of them. And I lived in an area with almost none of them. I rarely ever interacted with a woman of another race when I was going right through high school, right into college. Rarely ever. I can't even think. Like, the only time I would interact with women of other races would be in a non-educational background. So it would be like a teacher's aide, or it would be a teacher, or something like that. So I had no clue how these dynamics worked. Like, most of these guys that you see, most regular Zoomers, have no idea how these dynamics work. You only encounter them if you become aware of racial stuff in general. And then you can discover like race differences in attractiveness, race differences in, like, some races of women are easier to get if you're a certain race of man, like that sort of thing. And this is why when you see a mixed race couple, you're like, what's that meme with that guy who played in No Country for Old Men, where he's like, it's like white supremacist or ultra libtard, call it. Like, you flip a coin. It's going to be one or the other. It's going to be one or the other when you see a race mixed couple. Specifically meant older white women. I was not talking about men. So you're talking about like what that woman did, where you're talking about like this chick. I can't say I've seen that. If it has happened, it's not been something that's visibly noticeable. Like if that is something they're doing it without it being obvious. Like these kind of foids, in my experience, are quite rare. That will like brag about it and make it their personality. What demographic of men Gen Z women will end up dating is pretty easy to predict, since doofy guys end up being deselected due to their face genetics, giving them a reason to look for reasons to deselect you. In some ways, yes, but you have to remember oofy doofy is still a reproductive strategy, and it can work. In countries like Canada, where the economy just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, I actually think oofy doofies are going to get better and better and better in terms of their desirability. Because it's just going to be harder to support yourself. Like right now, it's very hard to live on a single income, even if you're living alone. A lot of white women will tolerate a guy who's sort of pathetic but harmless if he is has a good enough income. Like I've known couples like this, and it doesn't have to be by race either. It could be the same race, but yeah, it's pretty common. A decade ago, white women were dating a lot of Muslims and even some Indians, but it has fallen off. Many of those women are older, married mixed couples now. I also lived in Ottawa in 2017. Ottawa, I saw white girls with Arabs. That is one thing that you would see. Like if I did see a white girl with an ethnic, it would typically be an Arab. It would be like Lebanese or something like that. I think part of that is that these guys, if you look at how their culture functions, like they grow up really getting doted on as boys. Like their mothers and their fathers both dote on them. They treat them with reverence. They don't necessarily mistreat the girls, but the boys are made to feel special, and they're made to feel important for being boys. I would say that for whites, it's like the exact opposite. For whites, you grow up, like from the age of 5 onwards, you become more and more invisible as time goes on, and you're made to feel invisible. Like they make it very clear that this like public concern and the concern of adults is towards girls and their outcomes and how they're feeling. Like boys are pretty much just ignored. I wouldn't say that boys are outright ostracized, though maybe that is the case now, because I'm talking about this from the perspective of a younger millennial. I'm not a Zoomer, right? Zoomers, it may even be worse. Like they may actually be actively mistreated as boys. But when I was growing up, it was more like we were basically just invisible. Like all the support systems and the public consciousness of the adults was all oriented around girls, making sure girls were succeeding, making sure that girls realized how important they were. And white boys were pretty much just ignored. Like it was just sort of like you existed and just figure it out yourself. Very little concern. And I think this creates a phenomenon where a lot of these boys grow up completely demoralized. Like they think that they are just, it's like the exact opposite of what feminists think, where feminists think that boys are full of this toxic masculinity. And in reality, boys are just deeply demoralized, or at least white boys, and probably other races that are culturally similar. I doubt that Asians really get much positive. Like my perception of Asians, having talked to Asian Americans and Asian Canadians, is that they grew up with all these intense academic expectations, and there's not really a lot of positive reinforcement. Like it's very much oriented around like you need to succeed or you're worthless, sort of. But for boys, for white kids, it's very much like just total lack of concern. Like there's a lack of concern by the government. There's a lack of concern by the families, by the parents. And this is one of the good things that I saw on X going up as a phenomenon on the right wing, was pointing out how boomers, like boomer men, are in particular, are almost resentful towards younger men, but their daughters they dote on and they want the best for them. And so, for example, whenever you would see a comment of a boomer talking about how these white boys they're taking a useless degree, they should just go get a trade instead, they should just go be a mechanic or something. And then somebody would comment, what trade did you recommend your daughter go into? And then they would have a meltdown about it because, of course, they didn't recommend their daughters go into trades. It would be, my daughter's a researcher, my daughter's a psychologist, my daughter's this and that. Like they would just get super mad about it. And there was this one guy who posted, it was like, for my daughter, a college education and a well-paying white-collar career. For my son, digging the trenches and dirty blue-collar career or something like that. And that's not to shit on blue-collar, right? Because my entire family background is blue-collar. It's decent income. It's a good living, actually, if you can own a business. But the point is that they're normalizing pushing white men out of these white-collar industries and just creating these spaces for white women. And also men that are, in Canada, they call them racialized Canadians, which is basically everybody who's not white. So it's like that group and then also white women. In America, Asian men are typically excluded from this. Like Asian men don't get any special advantages. As a matter of fact, I think they have even harder time getting into Ivy Leagues than whites do somewhat. But yeah, so it's very much like ethnics that are not Asian and white women are going to be put into the front of the line. Not necessarily that they're getting in unfairly in the sense that they don't have the ability, but they're just, when it comes to, if they have matching qualifications with a white guy, they're going to get ahead of the white guy. That's pretty much what I'm saying. And the boomers were just perfectly fine with that. And there's a lot of anger. You can really feel it. It's palpable. There's a lot of anger with these younger guys towards these boomers because they understand exactly what this means. And I'm proud to see that that's finally happening. Like, it's finally a split from the trad right, where they're focused entirely on race and demographics. And like, we need to stop immigration, which, I'm not saying those are not issues, but they're finally focusing on the economic issues, like the disenfranchisement, the dispossession. And again, it's like that. It's like what was being said in this book here. What kills off primitive peoples is the loss, as it were, of their will to live, the loss of an interest in their own values. This is exactly what happened to what's happening now to us. And this is what happened to the natives when the Europeans arrived. And what was interesting was before decolonization in Africa happened, you saw something similar happening in Africa, actually. When the Europeans were actively colonizing Africa, there was a demoralization among the African men, and their populations were actually dropping during the time of Charles Darwin. Like Charles Darwin was writing, the African populations were falling. And under his belief, it was that when the white man as the civilized man shows up, these primitive peoples, they just naturally decline as a law of nature. He wasn't really analyzing it any better than that. But the reality was, it's because this new incoming group completely took over the dominant role in society. Like their identity, this invading group of men, became the dominant identity of the population, and this demoralized the men that were already there. And this is what I was talking about with Patria. When you are emasculated in that way, when you lose control of the territory that you have, and you're conquered by a foreign group of men, that is profoundly demoralizing. and it will lead to the death of your people. And it's the men themselves that just give up. It's not even like a matter of being violently exterminated or whatever. It's just that they gave up. And you see this to this day, and what is really remarkable is that we've had a problem with Native Americans up here, or Native Canadians, I guess you could say. They call them First Nations up here. We've always had a problem with drug addiction with them, and just suicide rate very high. I got to be careful what I say. Self-deletion rates are very high for Native Americans. And it seems like there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm actually quite sympathetic to the natives, because they have been part of our country since the beginning, of course. So I am actually sympathetic to them, but it's like, how do you help these people? And then what you're starting to see now is you're starting to see the same phenomenon with the whites, where you're seeing drug addicts everywhere. And these aren't old people either. These are younger people. These are people in their 20s, even younger, that are just becoming drug addicts. And, part of me is like, these white women, they're seeing, like these younger white women, let's say, who are just commuting through their lives, whatever, in and out of the city, they're seeing their men being these drug addicts, passed out on the street. Even though they know that's not most of us, that's still a visible thing in their minds. And that really is like the sign of a defeated people. And I can understand from their psychology, like why they would then elevate other groups of men, even in a way that wouldn't make sense to us, like in terms of looks theory, race theory, like all these things. It doesn't make sense, some of the things that you see. I'm not saying it's super common, but I have seen situations where I've seen like a hot white woman with an Asian guy who was like her height and not good looking in the face. And it was like, why is that? Well, if she grew up in an environment like this, and it's only been like this for about 10 years at most. But if she grew up in this environment, and this is like seeing drug addicts that are white everywhere, I can understand why she would develop a grass is greener thinking in that regard. I can understand the logic behind it. It's deeply demoralizing to me, and that's kind of when I decided that I have to take geomaxing seriously. I have to get out of this place, because like once your men become demoralized, it's over. It's you can't really come back from that. Like I can't think of. Africans did bounce back from it after decolonization and all the chaos that happened. Like basically all the infrastructure and development that the Europeans had built in the 1950s, it just collapsed when the Europeans left. It was like what happened in Afghanistan, where the government just collapsed within a few days of the U.S. pulling out. Like that was kind of what happened in Africa. There was a movie about it made called Africa Addio, and it was about all the chaos unfolding in Africa as the Europeans pulled out. And after that chaos, and there was a lot of death, there was a lot of destruction of wealth, a lot of chaos. But after that settled down and the populations reconstituted themselves, the dominant tribes took over the government. You have like, I think his name was Muhammad Kenyatta in Kenya. He was a Kikuyu. He took over Kenya, and he ran it as like a Kikuyu-dominated state. And it changed the perception of the public. It changed the perception of the women, I think. Even though the women in Africa, they still have a very positive perception of white men. Like they associate white men with wealth and with other positive qualities, but they're not refusing to reproduce, and you don't see the men just sort of committing suicide in there, or getting on drugs and dying of drug overdoses in large numbers, or just giving up and refusing to continue existing. Their populations are growing a lot. So, like, that could happen, but you would have to have, like, a collapse, but we have all these large populations of foreigners here, so I don't even know how that would work. Yeah, part of that movie when the Italians were not thought of as white by the blacks is hilarious. Yeah, that was funny. Well, I mean, look, Italians are usually pretty good humor about that. Like, you can joke about that with them. I find that Spanish and Portuguese, they get really butthurt, and they get like super sensitive if you make jokes like that with them. You know, and I don't get it. It's like, we're just roasting you. It's not like we mean it, but they take it really seriously. But Italians tend to be pretty good humored about it. And white boys should start race mixing again. Well, that's then we cease to be white boys in a few generations. But, you know, at some point you have to decide what's going to be good for your personal life, right? Like, one of the things that occurred to me was I'm living in this undignified existence, you know? And I remember talking about it when I got fired from that job. I remember I was talking about how this must be in some way how it was like if you were black and you lived under Jim Crow, and you were just like, if you were, an accusation was made against you by a white person in the white dominated judicial system, very odds are if it was just he said versus she said, you would probably get convicted. They just wouldn't believe you because you were basically a second class citizen. You know, and I'm not moralizing that one way or another, by the way. As I said when I did that stream, I'm not moralizing that. I'm not even saying that it's good or bad or whatever. I'm just saying that was the reality of it, right? And in that environment, I could see why blacks had a lower self-esteem than whites when they were first, like, they did these interviews and they did research on self-esteem with the different races before civil rights, and blacks were lower on self-esteem than whites before civil rights. And I can understand why, because I would have that feeling too. And I do have that feeling. Like, I don't feel good about myself living in this country, you know? And then you look at these guys who will go other places, and when you interact with other people in these other countries, suddenly being of your background is now a positive thing. Like, you're not seen as the enemy by the government. You're not seen as the enemy by the population. Like, when they talk about, like, if you're English and you go to Latin America, let's say, and you're an Anglo from England, I mean, probably not Argentina. Like, you probably get in trouble in Argentina. But I'm talking outside of Argentina. You're going to have a positive, like, people are going to have a positive impression of you. They're going to like your accent. They're going to have positive things to say or think about British people. It'll make you feel good about who you are. It'll make you feel good about being who you are. You know, and I think that's actually more important than even dating and getting into relationships, is having that positive self-image of your group. Having that positive self-image of your group. Italians, Spaniards, Portuguese aren't white, they are brown. I mean, they've been trying to use that, but it doesn't get them anywhere because they just end up getting hit with immigrants anyways. And I mean, one of the ways that I measure whiteness is like how libtarded are your women and how cucked are your men. Spanish and Portuguese, but especially the Spanish, are some of the most cucked and libtarded and feminist Europeans in the whole continent. Like, they are extremely bad. They're as bad as Swedes. They're as bad as Germans. They're as bad as English and Dutch, right? So I would say that the Spanish and the Portuguese, just by that metric, are 100% white. Italians are actually a little less cucked. I mean, they are on a political level, obviously, but culturally, like, Italians are less self-hating, I found. And Italian women, at least from the outside looking in, they don't seem to be as emasculating towards their men as these other groups are. That's just what I've noticed. And I did actually work with a white Brazilian once who was presumably of Portuguese background. And he was he would have looked indistinguishable. Like, if you looked at his cultural attitudes, he was indistinguishable from us. Like, by us, I mean white Canadians, in terms of, like, he was like a girl dad. He was, he had a boss wife who was, you know, happy wife, happy life. If his wife wanted to do something, he was going to do it. Like, he was that kind of guy that's very much European coded. It's a very much a pure Nordic phenotype coded behavior. And what about the French? I don't know. I mean, the French don't even really exist as a group anymore, right? Like, they're all kind of modified. So it's hard to say. The French in Quebec, I mean, the way it works in Quebec is if you speak French, they love you. Like, you could be Ngubu from the Congo. If you speak French, you're one of us. But that white guy over there who's half French, but he speaks French with an accent, or he speaks broken French, you are not one of us at all. We have to exclude you. But Ngubu and Abdul and Mohammed, who speak perfect French, these are our people. Like, that's how the Quebecois think. Anyways, I was gonna read this article. I got massively sidetracked, so I'm gonna read through it so I don't end up dragging this on forever. So I might skip a few of these things because there's some bloviating, but I'm gonna get to the important parts. I don't know what it's like to be a white woman, but if someone asked me what it's like to be a black woman, I wouldn't know what to say at first. I'd probably be cheeky about it. I'm just gonna skip the nonsense. If I wanted to get serious, I might bring up things I mentioned in token to break the ice, or I might begin in my household and how African American culture manifests in it, or I might speak of humanity, blah, blah, blah. At the height of 2020 race tensions in the United States, the part when military helicopters flew overhead at my part-time pandemic job, armored vehicles, blah, 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 I saw an article written by a black woman, presumably around my age, where she speaks of her personal lifelong agony of waking up each day in black skin. So I gotta find a Floyd like this. I gotta find a Floyd who's like this, because this is Wolf Slumber Pilled right here. This is exactly the kind of Floyd you're looking for. Because you could be like, well, I could solve that problem for the next generation. But obviously that's not what she means. Even with the sky falling around us, bit of slow motion Armageddon, struck me a highly unusual thing to say, mostly because I couldn't imagine hating myself that much. The ongoing gender circus. I've even heard fully grown, educated, professional black women voice this idea that their blackness excluded them from womanness, because to be a woman is to be feminine, and to be feminine was to be a white female. See, this is one of the funny tensions that you see in these online feminist circles, is that, like, obviously, whenever it comes to women, like any strongly held opinion or belief about women, you're always going to find a personal animus under the surface. Like, they don't develop their opinions and beliefs on things based on some rational discourse or some conclusion that they've arrived to after deliberating. There's always some underlying personal animus or tension, or some kind of chip that they have on their shoulder. And with black women, the chip is that they always feel inferior to white women in terms of femininity. And that's all that matters to them. It's not even accomplishment in terms of academics. It's not income. It's purely based on them not being seen as attractive as white women. I don't know what it's like to be a white woman, but any serious discussion I've had or observed about women based on race had me embarking on the yellow brick road of male culture. The Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain, to continue the metaphor, is very concerned about which men preside over which women. This is where she actually has some decent insight. Which is why I wanted to talk about the article. It's almost like humanity-spanning game of F, marry, kill. That's to say, which men get to F which women, which men get to marry which women, which men get to kill which women, and what are the righteous men to do about the thieving men who break the rules of this sacred practice? Who determines the righteous from the thieves? It is not often I think about white men. If I am speaking to them, there is a commonly understood and typically brief agenda to the conversation. Usually it is the case that we find ourselves working together at the same job. But they never had any role in any casual setting. They were not at my church. They were not in my home. They were some of my athletic coaches. They, nor any other type of male, were ever my friends, save for two rather timid by comparison instances. They never stepped forward to make their sexual ideas about me clear. They were very prominent during my grad school experience, both as classmates and teachers, which felt a little like being in the company of a different species at times. Oh man, dude, I'm getting so triggered. This is so racist. Anyways, the biggest obstacle is that up until a few weeks ago, in a decade of nonstop freelancing, I had never been hired by a white man. Coincidence? Maybe. So, what was important about this is that she has correctly identified, like, the central male concern, which is do we have collective ownership of our women, or at least access to our women? Where it's not so much that, and this is something that a lot of women, I think she deliberately confuses things in this as well. Because the impression that you get from women when we talk about our women versus these other men is that we're saying that we're entitled to pick you and sleep with you as a woman at our choosing. Like we have a right to demand that you are going to be our sexual partner or our wife or whatever. That's not the case. Really, what it comes down to is, do we have a right to veto access to an outgroup, a man from an outgroup background? That's really what it comes down to. Oh, I just got $5 from Philip. Great streams, Mercer. Well, thank you very much, Philip. I appreciate that. Anyways, just to go back to what I was saying. The idea is not that we're trying to force ourselves collectively onto women. Like, you must form a relationship with me now, I demand it. It's more like we are going to block off access to these outgroups of men. So yes, you can voluntarily choose any man you want within this group of men. That's really what men are asking for. And this isn't just white men, this is all races of men. I think it becomes most noticed with white men because obviously we are under the most pressure in this regard. I mean, I would say Asian American men are under more pressure than white men just in terms of their specific circumstance, but that's not the case in their home countries. But whereas with white people, it's like we're competing for our own women in our own countries. Like we have nowhere to go to. You know, like I can't go from Canada to the UK because the UK is probably even more buggered than we are up here. You know, so we are in a competition with every other group of men for our own women. And so this is where this demand of we need to be able to segregate access by outside men to our women in order to preserve our race or our nation. Every group of men wants this ultimately. And this woman is picking up on this, but she is, of course, is spinning it into they just want to control access to all women, or they want to demand access to women without their consent. They just want to have ownership of us. It's I don't know if it's a deliberate misunderstanding or not, but yeah. Anyways, I don't know what it's like to be a white woman, but when women showcase their loyalty to men, and in practice this typically means white men if you're a white woman, I see them as espousing a key component of male culture. Another term for this is the state of being male-centered or male-identified. Some might go as far as to say that this is their natural, logical, biological imperative. Humans are tribal in nature, after all. They stick to their own. That's the science, and so it must not be questioned. The existence of the white race is contingent on the continued birth of white babies and the preservation of the white family. Thus, white women, perhaps a little more notably than other races of women, given those who, in the male world, are deemed to most commonly preside over them, are the most high-profile woman product on the market in the power struggle among men. So she has identified this correctly. It might disturb many to frame it in this way. After all, it is only the neo-Nazis in their khaki pants and Trumper hats who tend to not sugarcoat the reality of the otherwise whispered goal. No one will F their women except them, no one will marry their women except them, and no one will kill their women except them. But of course, to do all those things to all the other races of women is fine and dandy too. To deny them choices in this way is oppression. And just like other races of women, I imagine many white women think their proximity to white men gives them power, but it does not. Not over themselves, at least. Well, this is where it gets kind of ridiculous, right? It's like, she is correct that this is, no one will F their women except men, no one will marry their women except men, and no one will kill their women except them. That is actually correct. She is correct in that analysis. I just explained why that logic exists. Like, that's the only way to perpetuate the race. Well, she explains it herself, right? This is why I kind of like this woman. And hang on, what do we have here? Oh, do I watch? Yeah. No, I don't. No, I don't. See you later, buddy. I think I have pissed off the Tails crowd. Anyways, I sometimes wonder about... Sorry. Just for a second there, I thought I was reading 4chan. I was like, what the fuck? Did I accidentally hop into a poll thread or what? Anyways. Just like to deny them this choice is the way of oppression. And just like other races of women, I imagine many white women think their proximity to white men gives them power, but it does not. Not over themselves, at least. The great and powerful Oz won't stand up for that. Over others, to an extent, if they wield the blade strategically. And it gives them lots of publicity, both historical and present-day publicity. I mean, that's just not true if you look at the history. And this is where I was thinking, this woman... she's intelligent. Like, she's able to reason. Like, we know what her priors are as a feminist. As a black feminist, we know what her priors are. And from her black feminist priors, she is reasoning intelligently. Like, she has actually, from first principles, constructed our point of view correctly. She obviously is coming at it from a negative point of view. You know, like, we're these domineering and possessive groups of men. But she has accurately described this segment of reality. But where she talks about white women not having any power here, this is just historically illiterate. Because, and as I had said, and I had actually gotten into an argument on Twitter with this white woman over this, because she was like, I forget the start of the thread, but she was going on along the likes of, like, I'd started talking about feminism and how, like, once these foreign groups of men become the dominant majority in our countries, and white men are no longer in the role of enforcing things or defining the culture, you're going to see these men abandon all of these norms that white women have taken for granted. They just sort of assume that these things are primordial and that they just happen naturally, and that men in general are interfering with this natural order. They have the causality completely reversed. It's like, no, actually, the natural order is you are basically, at best, you are slaves, like you are slaves to an individual man, which is what you see throughout the entire non-white world, like non-Western world. I would say even, like, you could even look at some Eastern European countries were fairly restrictive on women, that were more Oriental in that style. But if you look at pretty much every advanced civilization outside of Europe, women were domiciled to their homes. Like, they could not leave their homes without an escort. Like, in Korea, there was a specific section of the house that women were allowed to dwell in, but that was the only place they could stay in. Like, when there would be visiting men over, the women actually had to stay in their section of the house and not even be seen by the men that were not related to her or her husband. And that's Korea. Like, Korea is one of the highest IQ countries in the world. You know, ancient China is very similar. Like, women were confined to the home. Muslim societies, very similar. You know, women were confined to the home. And these are the advanced societies. These are the most complex civilizations outside the West. If you look at primitive civilizations, primitive civilizations, it's oxymoron. If you look at primitive societies, like, again, this is one of the things I was deriving from this book on Brazil I was reading. Did I just get a $5 from St. Vers? Wanted to give support plus access to the Discord and for a Black American video proposal. I think you should read this book called The Black Matriarchy by Sergeant William. Certainly, St. Vers. Just send me a message and on Discord, and I'll pass you through. As of right now, since I'm streaming, I'm not going to be on Discord, but when I'm done streaming, I will be on Discord. So you can just send me a message, and we'll pass you right through. Thanks for that. By the way, I don't have a pay tool on my Discord anymore. So the way that I'm doing it now is if I've seen you in the chat for a long enough time consistently, that I know that you're not just a drive-by or you're not just a troll, or if there are people that I trust in the Discord server that can vouch for you and that have known you, then I let you in. Now, for guys that are sending super chats as of right now, I will definitely let you in, but I am going to be changing that. I forgot to actually change the wording on my Discord server, so I'm going to make sure that that's clear in the rules, just going forward. But yeah, you're going to get Insane Verse, because I've also seen you in previous streams as well, so you're good to go. Anyways, yeah, the state of nature for primitive societies is, and this is another thing that really annoys me. Oh my God, Anton, stop throwing me off of my thought process. No, I do not, as a matter of fact. No, I do not. You know, I'm glad that there's a career path for these gentlemen, that they can maximize that asset of theirs, but that's not something that I watch. No. Good for them, though. Anyways, primitive societies, we're talking like tribal societies. The women didn't have the same restrictions, but they also didn't have the same protections. Like what you see, if you look at how the Tupi tribe in the Amazon functioned, it's not like they had any concept of sexual assault in their culture. Like the women were basically at the mercy of the men, and you know, whatever happened to them. And also, I mean, it wasn't just the men; it was also, or the women. It was also, like, you would see a lot of pederasty in these cultures. That one of the things they talk about in the book is how there was just constant pederasty in these Amazonian tribes among the boys. Like you just see a lot of uncontrollable perversion in these primitive societies, and that I would say is even worse for women than the strict jealous control that you would see outside of Western civilization, but where there are advanced civilizations. So there's no good outcome for women outside of what we've established in Europe as the norm. And what we established in Europe, and I remember I made a long post about this on Twitter once, quite a while ago. There's no reason to assume that Europeans would have taken over the world the way that we did during the colonial period. Like, I know that there's Ricardo Duchesne, who I like. He sort of makes an essentialist argument about the Western civilization, the rise of it, like kind of how it was sort of inevitably going to rise as a consequence of its priors. And I'm sympathetic to that point of view, but I don't think that's a guarantee, because like physical circumstances could have changed that outcome, right? Like it could have been that the Chinese happened to have an expansionist emperor when Zheng He did his explorations, and they could have been the ones to colonize Africa and Australia, right? Or maybe if the nature of the Chinese were different, maybe slightly more adventurous, they would have ended up in the Americas. Or if the Muslims had not practiced cousin marriage as a rule, maybe they would have preserved higher intelligence in their population, and they would have maintained their edge over Europe for a longer time. And they possibly could have been the ones to discovered America, or at least played a role in it. And then, like, what would happen if Europe, instead of being the dominant society where we're so culturally dominant throughout the world, that our unique institutions and our unique cultural elements are just assumed by women to be the foundations of all society, that you just sort of inevitably result in feminism. If instead of that, we just would have ended up as like a weird custom in this corner of the world where they allow their women to have these freedoms that the rest of us civilized, like the dominant parts of the world, don't follow. Like, let's say a Chinese-dominated world. Be like, these Europeans are strange. They like to allow their women outside their houses without an attendant. They proscribe the infanticide of girls. And their women are free to marry when they choose. Like, these are very strange customs. They're inefficient customs. They don't produce these highly efficient outcomes and optimal outcomes, because you're just allowing women to have freedom to choose whoever they want to be with. It's a very strange, backwards custom. Like, that could have been the fate of the world. And then the rest of the world would just be under a dominant patriarchy. And that would just be the established norm. And the point I'm trying to make is that it's very ephemeral. And it's very much not a natural outcome, but feminists assume that it is. And the danger there is that if they assume that this is just the natural outcome, which is what they do assume, then it's like, well, if you eliminate our countries, if you if you miscegenate us out of existence with foreign men, or you create the conditions where we can't marry you and reproduce a family with you because you're basically insufferable. If you create this outcome and then we cease to exist as a people, like this will be condemning any future women's emancipation. Like, it'll never happen again, because not only will the culture that produced that be murdered by its own women, but every other culture on earth that succeeds us can then look at us as the example of what happens when you allow these European values, these liberal European values towards women, to establish themselves and take hold. Like, we would be the example to point to. Like, we would become the next Roman Empire that everybody points to the fall of the Roman Empire, tries to figure out why it happened. This is what would happen to us if we disappear as a group. Or we become so demographically insignificant we're basically irrelevant culturally. You know? But it falls on deaf ears. When I've had this conversation, it's kind of pointless. My Twitter handle is Reggie Mercer. Yeah, I believe it's in the description as well of my streams. Anyways, I'm going to keep going with this. I sometimes wonder about women thousands of years ago who successfully fought off their male attackers and as a result did not reproduce. Well, honey, there are no examples in history, I guarantee you. Okay, I know that there's a meme that if you can think of something that has happened, it has happened at some point. I can guarantee you there's never been a situation where a collectivity of women has successfully defeated an army of men. That has never happened in history. And this is another thing, like, these women, they'll do this noble savage thing. It's like a Rousseauian noble savage thing where they'll go back to, like, look at these primitive peoples who had these matriarchal societies that were centered around women, and they had fertility goddesses. And actually, when you investigate those societies, no, they were, first of all, they were not matriarchal. Like, they could actually be quite brutally patriarchal, and women did not, like, in the actual matrilineal societies, the women themselves, it wasn't so much that the societies were matrilineal, like the men were sitting around obeying the women. It's that the men just didn't invest anything in, like, they would be there to, it's like the black community in America, you know, or they would just be there to impregnate the woman and then they would fuck off afterwards. Like, there would be no long-term investment. And surprise, surprise, like, you'll find some of these cultures in, for example, China. There's some of these minority groups in China that you can find that in their history, where they were these matrilineal societies where the woman controls the house and the man moves in with the woman. But then those societies got destroyed by the Chinese that migrated south. Right? So, I mean, they were defeated. Like, there's a reason why these are such rare societies. It's because the men are not, there's no incentive for the men to defend against outgroup men. Right. Mercer, normies never learn or remember. Normies don't even know why the Roman Empire fell. Yes, but normies are not the ones that set the tone for the rest of the society, right? So there are culture creators at the top that are going to set the tone. And, like, one of the major reasons why we're in the situation we're in now is because the tone setters in our culture are not from our background. Like, they don't care about the long-term outcome of our countries and our populations, right? If there's a changing of the guard and we get, for example, let's say, hypothetically, let's say the UK gets taken over by Pakistanis and there's, like, a Pakistani-dominated government in place in the UK. That government is going to be focused around perpetuating the Pakistani and Muslim population in the UK. And they're going to organize things around that. Right? Whereas, and they'll be able to point to this as an example of like, because the women are constantly going to be complaining about the expectations that women have in Muslim societies, that they're not allowed to take their headscarves off. And all that they have to do is they just have to point to, look what happened to the Europeans. You're describing, like if I was a Muslim and I was talking to a woman that wanted to be liberal, I would say, we can't allow this because the people that we replaced in the UK, that we took this country over from them, and we took their women from them, and their women voluntarily chose us over their own men because they espouse these liberal values and allowed their women to do this. Like that's how I would argue it if I was on their side trying to explain this to a Muslim Floyd that wanted to go down a liberal path. I would say, you are creating the conditions where we end up as weak and as incapable of protecting our interests as the men that we replaced in this country were. We cannot allow that, right? That's how they would do it, I think. Yeah, I'm sure they would spin it in a certain way to try and make it so it doesn't sound like we're just enslaving the women, but they would use that argument 100%. Because it really would be a rock-solid argument. Right. Anyways, let me just continue with this. The rights of women in the great melting pot of the United States, ground zero for how race relations are framed even in the regions where it really shouldn't translate the same way, have really taken off over the past century. But after those thousands of years of surprise snuggle, it's difficult to know which way is up. This is easily careened quite quickly into the positive promotion of prostitution and pornography, especially for women of color, the Looney Tunes Chekhov's anvil strung over our heads, more formally known as abortion rights, panic about overpopulation, most often drowned out by panic about underpopulation, distress about the state of the nuclear family and the men who aren't effing, marrying, and killing as much as they have a right to by divine, yet always logical and thus unquestionable decree, anger at men coming in from other countries to further disrupt that scientific natural order, all made messier and sometimes unspeakable by the proclaimed bigotry of the human female as a definable category to begin with. That is the whole wide spectrum of landmines. Coincidence? I think not. Photograph me in my tinfoil hat, it'll last longer. So I think the argument that she's making here is that everything, like women's issues have been obfuscated by all these other issues that have come into the foray, and therefore I guess she's trying to argue it's a conspiracy. This was one of the not so great paragraphs that she did. I don't know what it's like to be a white woman, but more than a few black women I've encountered have a tendency to bring up a study that states that white women are most desirable woman product and black women are the least desirable woman product. See, this is what I was saying. It always boils down to this. Everything, like a woman's primary motivation is going to boil down to who does she feel inferior to in a feminine sexual sense? What group of women does she feel inferior to? Or what group of women does she see as sexual competition? That's always what it comes down to. The black woman product, of course, currently has a few trendy parts that can be used as spares to enhance the overall visage of the white ideal. This often ties into ideas of femininity and masculinity, also a core tenet of male culture with a great many yellow bricks dedicated to it. My mother laments each time a black male celebrity unveils his white girlfriend or even worse, white wife. My sister angsts over all the weddings and baby showers she is invited to for her white sorority sisters, while the white men she desires only want to F her and leave. The YouTubers use their crystals and energy balancing cosmetic routines to unlock their divine feminine energy. She's referring to divestors here, by the way, which I'm sure if you're black or you know anything about the black manosphere or womanosphere, you know about the divestors. They're basically like black wigtow or whiz-tow, I guess, because a lot of them are whiz-tows, are no longer impeded by their blackness. Whole communities of black women proclaim their divestment from black men across the male culture war zone to swirl and level up in the trenches with men of other races. Preacher's voice turns raspy, yelling at us to look at ourselves, the state of the black family, results of emasculation of the black man by the white man, telling us all black queens not to abandon our black kings, because then the white man will win. Now, this is sort of more black-centric. It wasn't really the focus of why I wanted to read the article. Getting down here is more important. Most women, even most feminists, don't want liberation from men. Most women don't see men as people they need to be liberated from. Most women are male-identified and spend their energy making their cages as comfortable as they can be within the confines of the global male culture, the very air we breathe. They look at their mental habitats in satisfaction and mistake it or train themselves to see it as power and control over their personhood. They bond over the mental illnesses they are prescribed as a direct result of assimilating into their environment. I can't blame them, not really, not deeply, but even in the United States, especially the center of the empire, the programming proves that hard to shake. What can I even say? And in the midst of all this, I am asked by a white woman what I think about white women. Okay. And effectively, what she sort of bloviates a little bit here. And if you scroll down, she just basically says that women need to become lesbian separatists. And white women have to be the first women to become lesbian separatists in order to lead the way for other races of women. She effectively argues that. And then the white woman that she's having this conversation with says this out loud. She's like, so you're saying that we need to choose to be alone and separate from men? And she goes, oh, I back away from my computer screen and gouge my eyes out. Well, no, this is literally what you're saying, lady. But what was important about this is that, like, where she talks about how they spend their energy making their cages as comfortable as they can be within the confines of global male culture, the very air we breathe. And when I was reading this, I was just thinking to myself, yes, men are the layer that separates women from the state of nature. And this is where I realized this woman's big problem is that she doesn't exist in the real world. Like, first world women do not exist in the real world because they don't exist in the state of nature, and they don't need a man to be the barrier between them and the state of nature in first world countries like America. Okay, the government can provide for them. The government has police forces that ensure that no one can commit crimes against them, or that, you call the police, they'll be right on time. Obviously, there's different parts of the country that aren't that way, but I'm saying in general, they know that they can rely on the police state to come in and protect them. They aren't going to be in a position where they need resources. Like, if they're in a crisis position or a crisis situation, the government can provide them a safety net to bail them out. So they'll never go homeless as women. They're never going to starve. Okay, the average black woman's weight is like 180 pounds. Right? They're not starving. Okay? I remember thinking to myself, like, this woman, she needs to be, like, we need to take women like this. We need to put them in West Africa. Like, we need to put them in Ghana or the Congo or Cote d'Ivoire or one of these African countries where she would be much closer to the state of nature, where you can see what happens to people that don't have the protection of individual men, because the states in these countries are not capable of providing those protections to them. Right? The state cannot protect you from other men. The state cannot provide resources to you so that you are not in a you're not going to starve to death, or you won't have shelter. Right? Whereas in the real world, in the state of nature, there's no one protecting you. And it really makes me think, like, I wonder if these people, like, did this woman read the book, what's it called? What's the book where they're on the Lord of the Flies? That's the book I'm thinking of. I wonder if these people ever read the book Lord of the Flies, because the whole point of Lord of the Flies, the book, which if you've ever taken an English class in an Anglo country like the United States or Canada or UK, you're very likely to have been recommended this book or required to read this book in your high school education. And the whole point of the book is that a bunch of boys get stranded on a desert island, and they slowly regress into tribalism after they realize that there's, like, no adults there to police their behavior. And you see this increasing savagery and breakdown of morals that they previously assumed were just the default. And I really like that book because it portrays the state of nature as I describe it. And there's a movie that I really like that kind of, and the reason why I like it is because it shows this as well, is the movie 28 Days Later. I think it was Cillian Murphy's big break was in 28 Days Later. And look, this movie's like 20 years old now, so I don't think spoiling it is going to be too big of a deal. It's like a zombie apocalypse movie, and the protagonist and these two girls that are accompanying him, they are going to this military base that is broadcasting the signal throughout the city of London, saying, come here, we have food, we have resources, we control the perimeter, we are the British military. And when they arrive, they find it is this military base that's controlled by a lieutenant and like a dozen soldiers. But then they say, the only reason why these men are obeying me is because I promised them women. Like, I put out this, almost talking about that movie 28 Years Later, that's funny. I put out this signal so that we would attract women, so that I could parcel these women out to my men in order to keep them moralized in preserving civilization on the island. Like, that was effectively what he said. And this, like, the movie itself was all right. I think it was an indie film. It was pretty decent, but that particular element of it, I really loved it for that reason. Like, that genuinely is what would happen in an environment, a situation like that, is that you would see, in order to keep men loyal, you would need to promise them women, and you would need to figure out how to get access to these women. And this is what the fate of women would be in these environments. And I'm not even saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that's the reality. Like, I liked the movie because it felt real. It felt like, yes, this is what would actually happen. These women, they don't exist in reality, as I said, so they develop these ideas about a woman's relationship to men that are just completely out of sync with reality, right? And anyways, I just thought that it was fairly intelligent for an article written by a feminist, a black feminist. I mean, when I saw it was a black feminist, I was like, this is just going to be dog shit. But maybe she'll say some lulzy things that I can laugh at. Like, she'll seethe about white women. I can find that kind of funny. But no, actually, there were a few points where she understood. She understood on a better level than I think I've ever seen a white woman understand this. And I think it's because black women are more subject to market forces than white women are. And that's not to say that that black women have it terrible. Like, I think there was like a Tinder study where white men had an 8% match rate when they were swiping right on Tinder. Black women had a 40% match rate. So black women are still doing far better than white men, or any other race of men for that matter. But compared to other races of women, they are subject more to market forces. And so I think they have a better experience that gives them a more realistic understanding of how men think than what white women think. Because white women kind of exist in a fairy tale world. They exist in La La Land. And as a result, they can have these completely delusional beliefs, and there's no consequences for them holding delusional beliefs, right? Yeah, the closest female to an average man would be a black woman, and still it wouldn't even be close. Oh yeah, I saw this. This was funny, by the way. It's fun. This was going a little bit off on Twitter here. Germanics, the people that have always worshipped women. And half the comments are people saying, oh, no, this is cucked, this is simping. And then the other half are saying, yes, we worship women. We love women. We're heckin' based and feminist-pilled white nationalists. And you have a couple of Christ cucks as well. It's pretty funny. Anyways, there's another one, and I'm going to go over a little bit on my time, because I've been rambling a little bit more than I should probably, but whatever. Because I wanted to talk about this one foid that. Okay. So in the femosphere, I can't reveal how I know this, but there is a woman that is known as BJ Chan in the online feminist sphere. And she's this Polish woman young woman, who is obsessed with, she has like this neurotic obsession with fellatio. But she's actually very intelligent, and she actually rationally constructs an argument for her position, like her neuroticism. And she talks about how like sexuality for sexuality for women is all male centered, and that this is human biology that women are effectively slaves of men, and this is where Blackpill feminism comes from. It's called the Blackpill feminist discussion. And this is and actually I have to say, like, she's remarkably, I'll tell you what, if I had to pick a foid, I would really be interested in dating a foid like this, because she's kind of crazy and neurotic, but she's also very intelligent. And she clearly has like some crazy repressed neurotic desires that I think could actually be a great basis for a relationship. So, but of course, being that I'm a manlet, I'm also an old cell, and I'm in Canada, that's never going to happen. But I'm going to read some of her posts. Let me see if I can find him here. Here we are. I'd rather live a million lives as an animal pig. She describes women that give men BJs as pigs. This is how you can identify that it's her posting. And she'll look up like texts of women enjoying giving fellatio to men on Twitter, on Reddit, and she'll be like horrified about it. Like, she clearly has some kind of humiliation fetish. Anyways, so she says, look at who's the worst degenerate. Imagine defending this and normalizing it because it's natural. Women do it. We are living in a matrix. Humans can't even use the words they created to communicate without gaslighting others. Crazy, but I'm wrong about being paranoid. Look at the last ones. And then if you look at the... Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, dick sucking is natural. Celibacy is natural. Being blackpilled is natural. Being GNC is natural. The boundaries of nature are always vague. Yeah. Hang on. There was a reply to this, but I think it got... I think it was a... let me scroll down a little more. See if I can find it. Because there was a reply, but I don't think it got properly quoted. So I'm going to track it down here. Let's see here. And somebody was like, "There's no way that you looked up blowjobs just to make a post about this on this forum." Like, she's clearly obsessed with it. And it's an actual woman. Like, I know for a fact this woman's been doxxed. She's a female. Here, actually, I'm going to zoom down because I'm going to find... Here we go. This is the last few posts. This is actually where it's good. She just tries to communicate that female heterosexuality is more psychological. Don't know how to put it into words. In straight sex, a woman's body has to relax and submit to the deepest point of submission one can get to receive pleasure. So it literally happens psychologically first. Sex is about the whole body and not just genitals. It's also emotions in the female body sexually is different emotions than the male. Female is nurturing and loving others and also empathy. Female heterosexuality and het sex for women is about empathizing with male pleasure and taking it in as your own. Well, the male desire is selfish because their biology is not a coincidence. That what turns men on the most is certain positions and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, the point is, she creates this entire psychology around... women basically being submissive slaves to men sexually, and that it's in women's nature. And she goes into the biology about it. She says, since I expand my bioessentialism to women, sex and the inequality of the heterosex, people are dismissive, blah, blah, blah. Let me see if I can find it. PV and head sex women is inherently feminine role in her biology and only experiences feminine emotions in the whole body, since sex is about the whole body. And let me see. They have sex for male validation, and nothing makes het sex equal or makes up for women having to do violent, inherently humiliating acts like dick sucking. I thought it was a psyop, but at this point, sex having is a psyop because dick sucking is literally just reflected in female psychology. That is a reflection of their biology. So I'm saying, look, you can find crazy Freuds who are like this. And they can sometimes be quite intelligent, too. And actually, I was hoping to find some more smaller posts. These are more raw text posts. But this is actually a genuine femcel in the sense that she's celibate, not that she's an incel. But, yeah. Men can't love women. I don't think men can love women. They are a genetic mutation and don't bond the way complete humans do. Male inferiority permeates their entire being from physical state to cognition. Me being attracted to men means that I am devolved and mutated. There is no shame in admitting to that. Acting out on attraction to men is dangerous, and any woman with enough courage to face it will tell you a similar thing. Refusing to tackle an issue endangers you even further because an insurmountable amount of your time gets wasted on maintaining the delusion of safety, only for the discomfort to fester either way, since the issue itself has not gone anywhere. This is also BJ Chan. My mom is saying that since you are laughing, it means you aren't serious, and everyone who watches you is stupid. Well, that's just correct. I'm sorry. Like, this entire stream, every stream that I've done is entirely ironic. You know, it's not serious at all. And everybody that watches my stream, you basically have to have an IQ that is, sub 85, right? Like, you have to have an IQ that's so low that its stack overflows into, like, negative 1,000,000. That's the kind of audience I'm trying to cultivate. So, she knows exactly. But, yeah, there's actually an entire subgroup of black-pilled feminists, as I was saying. This particular one, BJ Chan's my favorite. But in general, they take the same assumptions we have about women. But they just, like in terms of the biological assumptions, but they come at it from a fatalistic point of view. And it would be interesting because it's like, well, okay, if you have a problem with the way things are, we have a problem with the way things are on our end, why can't we just come up with a solution that compromises, like where both sides compromise on some things, you know? But apparently that's impossible. Yeah, I think that's it for now, though, because now I'm rounding around 4 o'clock. I've been told that my 3-hour streams are a little too long, so yeah, there's not really much to talk about this stream, unfortunately. I just wish that Tails would have gotten back to me, because I had a conversation with him, and it ended with me showing the evidence for the things I was claiming yesterday, and then he just never got back to me. And actually, you know what? Before I go, I'm going to find... There's another... It's pretty funny. Well, it's not funny, it's tragic. Okay? There's a post that I made on X of... There was a French Freud who... Tragedy of tragedies. Let's see here. Her name was Barbara, a 24-year-old French girl. She was found dead in her apartment in Avignon, completely naked from the waist down, with clear signs of beating on her face and dislocated finger. The man arrested for her murder is Fouad Lazar, a Moroccan immigrant with 17 prior convictions. He was caught in the Netherlands thanks to a European arrest warrant. His record includes weapon possession, death threats, aggravated violence, kidnapping involving torture and barbaric acts, driving without a license, oh my god, and drug trafficking. Barbara's sister said she was a joyful, smiling woman full of life who loved her family deeply. She was beautiful. What happened to her is atrocious. These acts are unforgivable. We are furious about this violence. Who has the right to take the life of a beautiful 24-year-old woman who had her whole future ahead of her? And then you see the typical posts. Total waste, what a shame. There is so much death at the hands of these vile, incompatible men. We need to put more blame on the governments and hold them responsible. According to Islam, the Muslim horde has every right to take her life. These foul-smelling animals are utterly compatible with Western civilization. Sad, I am tired of hearing these horror stories coming out of Europe. They have not been holding these creeps accountable. And then this woman is she probably read the whole story. Ladies, kick these dirty dicks to the curb. Don't meet them, don't date them. Treat them as potential rapists and murderers and keep a wide distance. This won't stop until men from that country stand up against them. FFS pathetic. Okay. I asked Grok real quick, give me a few details on this story. So first he says, no prior relationship. Barbara's sister stated publicly that her sibling did not know Fouad Lazar beforehand. Brief encounter on the night. They appear to have met shortly before the murder, possibly at a local square known for bars, after which Barbara invited him and others to her flat where they consumed drugs together. Trigger point. According to the sister and initial inquiries, Barbara reportedly asked Lazar to leave her home, which may have led to his violent reaction. Like clockwork. Like clockwork. What do you say? Like, are you supposed to protect them from themselves? And I got into an argument with a guy on Twitter over this, where he was like, yeah, well, they're our property. We need to enforce our property rights. Like, he was doing the whole, like, white women are our property thing. And I was like, okay, you're saying white women are our property, but how are you going to enforce those property rights? Okay, because currently they're in a coalition with all these other minority groups in the state to ensure that you cannot enforce any property rights. Like, if you even say that, like, there were cases of these nationalists in the UK that were talking about our women getting harassed by these foreign men, and they had English women in their comment section saying, we're not your women, we don't belong to you. So, okay, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, they're not interested in being your women. You have no way of imposing yourself on them legally. You know, are you going to overthrow the state? I mean, if you want to do that, okay, there are groups of men that have achieved that. But, you know, the key example here would be the Taliban, right? Another example would be ISIS, okay? So we're talking about groups of men that come from a completely separate stream of civilization here, completely separate lineage. Like, you're not going to be able to replicate that. Okay, and if you have some way of replicating it, you're going to have to explain it to me because I don't see it. You know, like the way I've thought about it, and maybe I'm rationalizing my own personal decisions. That's possible. But to me, it feels like retreating to countries where we are still the dominant population, even if we're not the numerical majority, if we're still like culturally, aesthetically, idealistically dominant in the culture, like that's really the only option that we have. Like I would say these countries where we've become an underclass or we've become the outsider and our own women see us as outsiders in the dominant society, like we're outside of the dominance hierarchy in the society, I don't see a way for us to come back from that. Like the only reason why Pakistanis haven't dissolved into this demoralized mass with zero fertility rate is because their women are forced to stay in their communities. Like they're actually threatened with consequences if they leave. It's the only way that you can do this. It's the only way that you can enforce. Like if you're a low status group in a society, the only way that you can perpetuate yourself is by strict controls over the women. That's the only way you can do it. And we're incapable of doing that. I would say that we're structurally incapable of it. Like we're almost biologically incapable of it. So, anyways, I'm gonna check the live chat, and then I'm probably gonna wrap it up. Let's see here. My mom is asking why I'm listening to a boy who's likely younger than me. I've heard that a lot. It was funny because my My video on demographics that Metacan re-uploaded, there was a bunch of, like, there's half the comments are like, wow, this is really high IQ. Half the comments are, I don't understand. And then there was like 3 or 4 comments about like Alvin the Chipmunk. It's pretty funny. And Tails is struggling with cognitive dissonance because of your information. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm not even anti him. Like, if he achieved what he wants, which is a German ethno-state, I would be happy for him. Like, I wouldn't mind. I would like to see a world in which the Germans can perpetuate themselves as a people. Because I think, as, you know, catastrophic wars aside, they have contributed disproportionately to the betterment of humanity as a group. So it's a good thing that we have them existing as a group. I'd rather they continue to perpetuate themselves. I'm not even opposed to him in that way. I disagree with him on his ideological priors with regards to women and his assumptions about women. And I think it's important that we hammer out who's correct in this or not. Because if he is wrong and I am right, if he acts on priors that are incorrect, then it's going to end in very bad outcomes for him and his movement. Like, that's the point that I try to make, right? It's not that I want the situation to be as I describe it. I really don't. Like, this is one of the things that makes it very hard to get up in the morning, right? Like, actually, this is something that I've thought about that I feel really, bad about is, like, when I think of the nature of my civilization and the things that we're supposed to see as positives, I mean, like, how mainstream people would see as positives. Like, we think about, like, how we have, like, women have freedom in our societies, like, we allow them to exist relatively comfortably without imposing ourselves on them. We have this sort of relatively easygoing culture when it comes to social norms, individualistic. And then when I think about the consequences that it's just basically leading to our extinction as a group, and the extinction is being led primarily by our own women because they're choosing out of their own free will to result in this consequence, result in this outcome. It creates almost like some self-hatred because I feel like these are things that I feel a natural affinity to, you know, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not naturally, like, I talk to guys from the Muslim world who were born and raised in the Muslim world, and, like, they have attitudes towards women that don't come naturally to me at all. Like, sort of these domineering, possessive attitudes towards women. I'm sounding like a libtard now, but it's true. Like, they have these attitudes towards women that do not come naturally to me. I don't feel naturally like that. I couldn't really, like, it would seem forced if I tried to impose my will in an aggressive way on, say, if I had a wife. Like, I would find that difficult to do because it just wouldn't feel right to me because it's just not in my nature. But then I realized this nature is what is resulting in the extinction of my group, you know, and it creates a lot of like, I don't, self-hatred's a little bit of a strong word, but it creates a lot of, like, resentment of my own nature in some ways, you know, because these aren't things that I dislike about myself either. They're things that I thought were good when I was a child. You know, I thought this was a good part of my nature, but then I realized this is something that is basically suicidal. And yeah, that was a bit of a ramble, but let me catch up on this. Why do ethnics want white women so much, considering they see how weak they are? Well, there's an element of dominance there as well, right? Like, if they can take the white woman, because there's a constant comparison, and it's kind of hard to understand this if you're white, because we don't compare ourselves to other groups of men on, like, a civilizational basis. But a lot of ethnics, they do compare their own heritage, their own history with ours. And it creates, like, this feeling of inferiority in some of them. And, like, there's this need to constantly prove yourself to this group that has defined the world for so many centuries, you know? And a big way to, like, to rub it in his face is to take his woman and make his woman your own. I don't think that's a healthy psychology to have. Like, I think any relationship you would form with a woman like that, like, eventually it would. It's kind of similar to the white guys who will get with Asian women because they feel resentful towards white women, and they're like, well, I'm going to get with this Asian woman, and they like make everything about that, and it creates a weird dynamic where their relationship is more centered around like opposition to white women than their own like actual relationship. And I think for white women that get with ethnic guys, there's a lot of not all, of course, but there's a significant percentage of ethnic guys where it's the same dynamic, where it's like that woman who got beaten to death by that Jordanian guy. I guarantee you, a big part of it for her was, I'm gonna rub it in the faces of these racist white men that this man is a migrant from these countries that they hate, and he's superior to these men. And I'm going to prove it to them, and I'm going to rub it in their faces. And I'm sure that the Jordanian guy, I honestly, I don't even know if he's smart enough to think this way, because this is more typically something you see with second-gen ethnics that grew up in white countries. But like, they sort of create a dynamic where it's centered around being opposed to white men. You know, and again, I'm not even saying that this is most relationships between white women and ethnic men, or white men and ethnic women, but for the ones that are like that, that's often what happens. And it creates a weird dynamic that I don't think, like, I think those are the ones that tend to crash and burn pretty quickly, or in the long run at least. It's pretty crazy. If you're a white Chad, you probably wouldn't have these negative emotions and depths to talk about these topics in your vids. Well, you know, Saint Verse, I was talking about this in VC, actually. I think yesterday. Like, if I was Matt Damon, like, I completely understand why Matt Damon is a totally ridiculous libtard feminist. I understand it completely. If I was Matt Damon, I would also be a libtard, like, ridiculous, pathetic feminist. Because you have to think of it, you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone like Matt Damon, where he spent his entire life being... And he's considered, by the way, he's considered one of the good ones in Hollywood. Like, he's considered one of the good gentlemen in Hollywood, I think. I mean, I don't really follow it too closely, but generally speaking, women see him as, like, one of the good ones. Like, whereas Leonardo DiCaprio is considered one of the bad ones, because he's always dating 25-year-old women. But for Matt Damon, like, he would make statements about how he supports feminism and, like, we need to do better as men, like, all this sort of shit. Like, if you spend every waking moment of your life from the time that you became a sexual being, like when you hit puberty and you entered that phase, women rewarded you for that, and they were always good to you, you know, or at least the overwhelming majority of women were good to you, such that the bad women that are, like, have personality disorders or whatever, you have enough experience with the opposite sex that you can note that down as an example of bad individual. Like, not you don't need to generalize it to the group. Like, I could see why he would preserve these beliefs, especially if he's the kind of guy who's sort of naturally like that anyways. Like, if he's the kind of guy who's genuinely, like, one of these supreme gentlemen. This is like supreme gentleman is like the dark path that this guy takes when he ends up as an incel and he's not attractive. But if he is attractive, he'll end up in, like, Matt Damon mode, where, of course, he's just a perfect gentleman because women are always nice to him. They've always been good to him. They always are attracted to him. That's another thing. Like, they want to date him. They're attracted to him. Like, I think if every woman that I interacted with was attracted to me on some baseline level, and I knew it, and they were always good to me as well, I would definitely be a feminist, probably. I could see it. It's interesting how the same dudes want white men to breed with their women. Well, I don't know who you're talking about. Like, do you mean Hispanics? Because, like, Muslim men, if they... Like, one of the cool things about Lolcow Farm is that you can find different subgroups of women. And, like, there's the Uncle Bashir meme the Uncle Bashir meme was going viral on X concerning these ethnic feminists that are like third world shithole feminists that are seething about their men all the time. And like for the most part, you'll find stories in the ex-Muslim thread, for example, on Lolcow Farm, where they'll talk about, like, I knew a girl, and it could be false, but this is what they're saying. They'll say things like, I knew a girl who had a white boyfriend. We're talking like in the UK, and they're Pakistani, and she got beaten within an inch of her life, and then she disappeared, and I never saw her again. Or like, I knew a girl who flirted with a non-Muslim guy, and she got sent to Pakistan, and we never heard from her again. Like, you'll hear stories like that, right? So they are extremely, as a matter of fact, the Muslim world, jealousy is called khira, I think, or it's khira, something like that. It's considered a virtue to be jealous as a Muslim. Like sexually jealous of your women. And it's seen as a moral flaw if you are not jealous as a woman. Right? So, those cultures, no, they are extremely jealous. They're extremely patriarchal. Like, there was a recent thing on Reddit that went viral of... there was a guy in a workplace in America who asked this Iraqi Muslim guy how his wife was doing, because his wife used to work at the place that they're working, but she stopped working there. And he snapped, and he was like, how dare you ask me about my wife? And apparently it's a cultural thing in various Muslim countries that you are not even allowed to inquire about a man's wife, like in a completely neutral setting. Like it's seen as like a personal affront to or an insult to his masculinity that you are asking about his wife, because it's like, why are you asking about his wife? Or do you want to get with her or something? Like, it's that degree of jealousy that is extremely strange from a European perspective. Are white shifted mutts affected by inherent gynocentrism? Ooh, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like, do you mean like ethnics that are white passing? Yeah, I mean, they're kind of fucked over, right? Because they end up just getting coded as being white. And they lose their ethnic, any bonus points that they get from libtards. But, it's what happens. Now, I don't think it's the same as, like, Happas that end up looking really Asian, and then they basically deal with the same problems that Asian men deal with in dating. I don't think it's the same as that. But definitely they would not be allowed to have cultural passes when it comes to what is seen as misogynistic behavior. Please show the face of that high IQ femcel on the forum. Well, I don't have that up right now, and I'm about to shut down the stream as it's getting fairly late for me right now. I have to run to the store, so... Actually, it's been on a little longer than I expected, but I'll tell you what, if I do find a photo of this chick, because I'm curious myself, I didn't bother looking into it, but I will do a YouTube post about it if I do find a photo of her. I just know that she's Polish, and she is like a NEET, I'm pretty sure. Like she lives in a house that her parents pay for, and she's completely neurotic, and is also a virgin, is my understanding. She's apparently a fairly prominent legend on these internet feminist forums. White women are red-shifted, they're wandering away so fast. Yeah, it's really funny. It's a good one. The majority of America is conservative, especially the Midwest and South. Well, kind of, but the Midwest and South also has an oversupply of men relative to women. Like, the women all move to the cities, and they move to the big cities and the coasts. Like, you see, that's where there's an excess of women. There's an excess of men in the Midwest. I don't know so much about the South, but in the Midwest, there's like huge oversupplies of men relative to women. It's kind of shit, actually. I was reading this post about this these Brazilians that, again, this is from the same book. Actually, here, we'll end on this, all right? We'll end on this. The physical experience of love is anticipated by the abuse of animals and even of plants. This is the Brazilian experience of the interior of Brazil, where the interior of Brazil at this time is basically similar to the Alaska, but on steroids, where there's like 4 times as many men as women. So it's just like a sausage fest and a bunch of frustrated dudes that are perma-virgins. And it says, in the effort to satisfy that fury with which sexual instinct dawns in them, the lads make use of cows, nanny goats, ewes, hens, and other domestic animals, or of plants and fruits, of the banana tree, the watermelon, or the fruit of the mandacaru. These practices which, with the sertanejo, make up the period of his adolescence and sometimes until he is married, make up for the lack or scarcity of domestic or public prostitution. Nurses, mulatto girls, Negro houseboys, public women, and through whom the plantation lads and those in the cities of the seaboard so soon become contaminated. Like this is... When I read this, I laughed my ass off. I mean, it's tragic when you're... that feeling when you're so deprived that the watermelon is really starting to look feisty to you. Those are really hard times, man. But yeah, that's the interior of Brazil in I think it was like the 17th century when it was all dudes. There was no women because the women were either directly in the jungle or they were in the coast. Yeah. Well, I'll see if I can find them, Rundown Mid. Who grins in a photo for their ID card? Yeah. Well, that's good. She should think that that's me. I'd rather her think that. Anyways, guys, I'm going to end the broadcast now because it's actually gone on a little longer than I wanted it to, but that's all right. So, let me see here. Who grins in a photo for their ID?